let's talk about the potential of the return of the Nephilim in the last days. Are they coming back? Well, going back to that chart, looking at what happened, Yeshua said it was as the days of Noah, right? Not the days of Jared. Now, after the first generation Nephilim were killed, the Watchers were judged, bound, and buried for how long? 70 generations, right. We get that information from 1 Enoch chapter 10, verse 12. For 70 generations they shall be buried. Well, Psalm 90, verse 10 defines a generation as 70 years, 80th by strength. Well, if you just went on the low side, 70 times 70, 4,900 years, from roughly 3000 BC, brings us to the beginning of the 20th century. 4,900 years from 3000 BC, beginning of the 20th century. Makes you wonder, think about that. Think about the 20th century. Think about the Industrial Revolution in the end of the 1800s and crossing over into the 1900s. It was basically a flat line, right, in terms of transportation, horse and buggy, beasts of burden and stuff like that, to all of a sudden locomotives, planes, trains, automobiles, supposedly sending people to the moon, and airplanes and space probes and all that in like 50 years, 60 years, less than 100 years. What happened? I think we may be looking at the return of the Watchers. I think that they maybe are being systematically released. I don't know if they're all released at the same time, but if you look at the book of Enoch of what the Watchers taught men to do, and you look at what men started doing in the 20th century, it's a really good match. I was looking at some information regarding knowledge and transportation in a pre-flood world. I believe was way more advanced than we are. What we're doing with computers and stuff, I believe they were doing with their brain. I think they were doing, they had a better understanding of crystals and all kinds of stuff. I think they were far more advanced than we are today. Of course, the flood narrows it down to 8 people, and then after that, they start to repopulate the earth. And by the time you get to the Tower of Babel, you got about 600,000 men, at least, by the time of the Tower of Babel. And so, assuming that some of that wisdom and understanding was retained in Noah and his 3 sons and was passed on to the successive generations, they're all together in the plains of Shinar under the leadership of Nimrod, and their plan is to build a tower to reach into heaven. And if you keep reading throughout the other texts, their plan was to kill God. Effectively, they're like, oh, really? God wiped out the whole pre-flood world? Huh. All right, let's take God out. That's what their plan was. So God said, oh yeah? I'm going to mess up your languages. Which was a brilliant move on God's part. Because if this is what they're going to do with all this wisdom and understanding, what better way to knock all that wisdom down than to confuse everybody's languages so you can't understand what the other guy's saying? So there were 70 different people groups, 70 different languages. They all went away from the same place talking about the same god, Nimrod, now with different names because they have different languages. We'll talk about that in the next session. They all go away. Now, what happens if you got you got Tesla and Einstein in your group? And then this other group over here has Pee Wee Herman, and well, not much good. These guys are the guys going to be, carving on caves. Here's a pretty horse, You see how wisdom, knowledge, and understanding can be easily chopped way down from what it was just by the act of confusing the languages, easily. And then it kind of fluctuates. And transportation stays pretty much the same: horse and buggy, beast of burden. There's some peaks and valleys of knowledge and wisdom and understanding. But then you hit the late 1800s, early 1900s, and last days, knowledge shall increase. You also have characters showing up in the beginning of the 20th century, like Aleister Crowley. Showing up, he does in January through March of 1918, famed occultist Aleister Crowley began a series of magical experiments called the Amelantra Workings, in which he is said to have opened a portal to another dimension, allowing an entity, I believe a demon, or possibly a fallen angel, named Lamb to enter through it. Could this have been one of the ways that these guys were released? Their prison sentence was nearing an end anyway, if not coming to an end completely. And then through the act of man, these guys start being released, maybe. Interesting, this is the picture he drew in 1918 of the entity that came through. Looks a whole lot like the alien grays of today's pop culture. Interesting. Well, he had some disciples, namely Jet Propulsion Laboratory founder and rocket fuel scientist Jack Parson and Scientology and Dianetics founder L. Ron Hubbard. These guys were disciples of Crowley. And in March of 1946, at a location that later became known as Area 51, these guys started doing an experiment they called the Babylon working. Like the Emelantra working, it was based on ceremonial sex magic. Unlike Crowley, however, they were not as adept at opening and closing portals, and theirs apparently stayed open, and the modern UFO era began 1 year later, 1947, the same year Crowley died. Interesting timing. Is it also just coincidental that at the same time, when all that's going on, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found? From 1946 to 1956, they kept finding stuff in these caves that were buried, like the Book of Enoch. And if you open up the Book of Enoch and read chapter 1, the first couple of verses says, this book is not written for this generation, but for a remote future generation who is to come that will live in the day of tribulation. How many of you think we're getting close to the last days? It says right in the first few verses of Enoch, hey, this is for that generation. And we just so happen to find these books. That's why I think there's value in these books. Because they give us a great deal of information about what was going on with these watchers the first time around. And if they're being released, they're going to be doing a lot of deceiving. Right? This whole weekend is called Decoding Deception. Well, a whole lot of deception is coming from these guys. I think the timing is really interesting. You know, again, is it just a coincidence that these books are popping up right at a time such as this? And I mentioned Daniel earlier, where it talks about in the last days knowledge shall increase. Well, Daniel also says in Daniel 2:43, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they, who's they, shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. So we have human seed being mixed with they. Who are they? But they, whoever they are, shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. I think this is a prophetic, this is something that may be being fulfilled in the whole alien abduction thing. If you start looking into people like Dr. David Jacobs and others that do interviews with people who claim to have been abducted and had things done to them, over and over and over and over again, you hear testimony of them being put into like a laboratory type setting where they're having seed and eggs extracted and embryos implanted and fetuses removed. It's all very scientific. There's blending taking place there, but it's not taking place through copulation. They're not having sex. It's all very scientific. I think that's what this could be, a fulfillment of this prophecy right here. Again, I'll point to what Yeshua said as the days of Noah, not the days of Jared. The days of Jared were marked by mating of angels and humans. I don't think they're mating with us anymore. They could be doing things through genetic manipulation, like in the alien abduction scenarios. But when it comes to the days of Noah, we see that that's when the creation of animal-human hybrids took place that brought about the corruption of all flesh and the judgment of the flood. If I'm to take Yeshua's words literally, all I have to do is watch the evening news. More and more so these days. In fact, I don't know if you guys were following my YouTube channel and stuff. If you were, hopefully you did cast your vote. But I do not believe our votes count in terms of presidents. But I think we still have a voice at least some other things. And we were given an opportunity to express our concerns regarding the lifting of the ban of blending of animals and humans. There was a ban that was imposed on the whole idea of blending humans and animals together. That they were put a proposal that said that they were going to consider lifting that ban, but they wanted to hear from us by, I think it was the 6th, just a few days ago. So I had found out about it like around September 1st, I think. I was like, oh man, we got like 6 days here, holy cow, So I put out a video just saying, guys, please, this is not good. Now we know the inevitable is going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen on our watch. When I look at 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then he says, I'll hear you. I'll heal your land. We know what's going to happen. Revelation, a lot of prophetic scriptures, we know it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean it has to happen on my watch. I think we can push some of these things off. There's plenty of places in scripture that show that we can. Now, I know a lot of prophecy guys out there think tomorrow's the end of the world. The rapture's any second now. A comet's going to come or something. There's always something in September. Last September 23rd was the big hot button. I don't know if you remember. Personally, I think we probably have as little as 18 more years to go, possibly as much as 80 based on the research that I've been doing. I hope I'm wrong. That doesn't mean that if we have 18 to 80 years that it's going to be good. But my opinion is we're not in the days of Noah yet. We are taking our beginning first steps. We're in the phase of the flare going off in Genesis 6:3. Genesis 6:3 was the warning shot. Guys, you better knock it off. 120 years. If what we're reading about and what we're hearing about in the news about what's happening with animal-human hybridization, if that's what they're telling us, what do you think they're not telling us? I'm not so naive to think that, if we cast our vote, we don't want the ban lifted, it's not going to happen. Look, I know DARPA exists. I know they're creating super soldiers. I know there's probably islands of Dr. Moreau out there. I know other nations are doing their thing. My issue was I don't want you using my tax dollars to do that. I am not in support of that. Yeah, crazy stuff's going on. We are taking our beginning steps. We're seeing it all the time. When I think of transhumanism, I think it's a doctrine of devils. When we go back to what I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, with the 3 promises of the serpent, right? We're a promise of immortality. Your eyes shall be open. You have greater wisdom and understanding, right? And you shall be as gods. Okay? Look at those 3 promises right there. Keep them in mind as you listen to the words of Professor Nick Bostrom.
Well,
hang on.
Interested in is to try to understand the bigger picture for humanity, our place in the world, and what might lie in store for our species in the future, particularly the way we might use technologies to enhance ourselves or to go beyond what we currently think of as our human nature, whether it might be by radically extending the human lifespan through solving the problem of aging, or increasing our intellectual capacities, improving our memory, or taking control of our own emotional states. I think that we are right now in a transitional phase where before the end of this century we will either have gone extinct or we will have most likely taken the step to become what you might call transhumans or posthumans, or just very enhanced humans that have reached their full potential.
The same 3 promises in the same order. In the exact same order. Wow. If you go to his website, Professor Nick Bostrom is one of the more vocal spokespersons for transhumanism. He has this chart on his website, and he says, this circle right here, this represents what humans can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. This is what our senses, what we are capable of perceiving. He says the animal kingdom, however, has this realm right here. We know that some animals can see in different frequencies that we can't see in. They can hear in frequencies that we can't hear. They can, you have the radar of a bat, the sonar of a dolphin, right? We know that various creatures have abilities that we don't have. So he says, well, what if we blend humans and animals together? We might end up with these abilities right here. And if we keep messing around with the genome and keep messing around, with transhumanism and stuff, we might end up with this really big oval right there. And basically these guys are saying we'll become like God. We will become the gods. That's what they're saying. That's right there on their website. Now let's talk about genetic transhumanism. There's also the variety of transhumanism that deals with the blending of humans and machines. So how many of you know what the singularity is? Yeah. Singularity is the technical creation of smarter than human intelligence. They're talking about, there's going to come a time where computers are going to surpass humanity, and it's all over after that. You're in Skynet, Blade Runner, Terminator. You're in that realm after that. And they have all these Time magazines, covers. One of them right there, 2045, the year man becomes immortal, shows a dude with a plug in the back of his head. If you go to 2045.com, 2045.com, just read about the 2045 Strategic Social Initiative. The 2045 Strategic Social Initiative. They have stated objectives. And right there, right now, they're into the 2015 to 2020, and they're already making strides to achieve their milestones here. So they're on a good trajectory to meet their other ones. And their stated objective is to achieve immortality, we would say parenthetically apart from God, by the year 2045. So I can't really see much beyond 2045. I mean, if we're still here, it's going to be crazy. Truth is going to be way stranger than any science fiction that we've seen in the past, in my opinion. Nephilim and prophecy. Well, this is one of several scriptures that I could point to that I would suggest may be references that would lead us to believe that we could be dealing with Nephilim in the very near future, is where we see the beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Where does beast come from? Okay. Keep that in mind for the next presentation. And go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life for the foundation of the world. Who are these people? What happens if you reject Yeshua as your Savior? If you don't accept Jesus as your Savior, what happens to your name? It's blotted out, right? Well, you can't blot something out unless it was there to begin with. It had to have already been there. I basically believe that it's like whenever I do public speaking, I just say, look, get me there and give me a hotel room to stay, and I'll speak anywhere. I don't charge to speak or anything like that. Just get me there and put a roof over my head. So when I come to an event like this, I just have to go over to the counter over there, give them my name, and my room has already been paid for. Right? Typically, my name's already on the register. All I have to do is confirm my reservation. Price has been paid. I think it's essentially the same thing. Our name was put in from the foundation of the world. All we have to do is confirm our reservation. Yeshua paid a very high price to get you that mansion, right, that's coming. But if you show up and you say, well, we paid the price, everything's paid for, you rejected it. Why? I don't know why you chose to do that. Sorry, dude, I'm going to have to blot your name out. You reject it, you get blotted out. If you accept it, you just confirmed your reservation. Does that make sense? So then who are these people whose names were never written? I think they're people that never meant to exist in the first place, in my opinion. These are probably created in laboratories, or these are probably, various abominations that were not meant to exist in the first place. Now, I'm going to play a video here. How many of you have heard of CRISPR? CRISPR technology. This is going to explain just how far we are into this right now. Again, if this is what they're telling us, just imagine what they're not telling us.
If the old techniques of genetic manipulation were like a map, CRISPR is like a GPS system. Aside from being precise, cheap and easy, CRISPR offers the ability to edit live cells, to switch genes on and off, and target and study particular DNA sequences. It also works for every type of cell, microorganisms, plants, animals or humans. Over 3,000 genetic diseases are caused by a single incorrect letter in your DNA. We are already building a modified version of Cas9 that is made to change just a single letter, fixing the disease in the cell. In a decade or two, we could possibly cure thousands of diseases forever. But all of these medical applications have one thing in common. They are limited to the individual and die with them, except if you use them on reproductive cells or very early embryos. But CRISPR can and probably will be used for much more. The creation of modified humans, designer babies, and will mean gradual but irreversible changes to the human gene pool. Modified humans could alter the genome of our entire species because their engineered traits will be passed on to their children and could spread over generations, slowly modifying the whole gene pool of humanity. It will start slowly. The first designer babies will not be overly designed. It's most likely that they will be created to eliminate a deadly genetic disease running in a family. As the technology progresses and gets more refined, more and more people may argue that not using genetic modification is unethical because it condemns children to preventable suffering and death and denies them the cure. But as soon as the first engineered kid is born, a door is opened that can't be closed anymore. Early on, vanity traits will mostly be left alone. But as genetic modification becomes more accepted and our knowledge of our genetic code enhances, the temptation will grow. If you make your offspring immune to Alzheimer, why not also give them an enhanced metabolism? Why not throw in perfect eyesight? How about height or muscular structure? Full hair? How about giving your child the gift of extraordinary intelligence? Huge changes are made as a result of the personal decisions of millions of individuals that accumulate. This is a slippery slope. Modified humans could become the new standard. But as engineering becomes more normal and our knowledge improves, we could solve the single biggest mortality risk factor, aging. 2/3 of the 150,000 people who die today will die of age-related causes. Currently, we think aging is caused by the accumulation of damage to our cells, like DNA breaks and the systems responsible for fixing those wearing off over time. But there are also genes that directly affect aging. A combination of genetic engineering and other therapy could stop or slow down aging, maybe even reverse it. We know from nature that there are animals immune to aging. Maybe we could even borrow a few genes for ourselves. Some scientists even think biological aging could be something that eventually just stops being a thing. We would still die at some point, but instead of doing so in hospitals at age 90, we might be able to spend a few thousand years with our loved ones. Even further into the future, we could engineer humans to be equipped for extended space travel and to cope with different conditions on other planets, which would be extremely helpful in keeping us alive in our hostile universe. The technology is certainly a bit scary, but we have a lot to gain, and genetic engineering might just be a step in the natural evolution of intelligent species in the universe. We might end disease. We could extend our life expectancy by centuries and travel to the stars. There's no need to think small when it comes to this topic. Whatever your opinion on genetic engineering, the future is approaching no matter what. What has been insane science fiction is about to become our new reality. A reality full of opportunities and challenges.
Just so you know, this technology is extremely inexpensive. From what I understand, it's under $10,000 to get this equipment, and probably with a little bit of training, start doing your own thing. And so from what I understand, it's already, high schools have these things, colleges are having these things. I mean, that's how easy it is becoming to start tinkering with the human genome. We're in the days of Noah. We're taking those steps. And these guys are telling you, it's inevitable. This is going to happen. You're going to start seeing people that are hybrids. Did you see how many pictures they showed of people with tails and wings? And, interesting, though, that they said, it may just be part of normal evolution, and they showed aliens sitting there. No, I don't believe that there are aliens. I believe we're dealing with fallen ones. Deception. Exile. The problem is, when Adam and Eve fell for the deception and went into disobedience, they were just exiled from the garden. When we get to this point, we're being exiled from eternity, from with God. We're being exiled from the kingdom. That's a big problem. Again, I'm going to refer to that I think Nephilim basically essentially amounts to when that which has fallen from the original state. And I think that's what's taking place. Now, when it comes to all this stuff, I talk about all these things and sometimes people get a little bit freaked out. I don't want to leave you in fear. Scripture says that my people perish for what? Okay, so if people perish for lack of knowledge, what if we got educated? So I'm just trying to show you what's going on. This is what's happening. But I want to encourage you because there's a really interesting conversation that took place in Caesarea Philippi. And I never really understood the significance of that conversation until I stood in the location where the conversation took place in 2005. That location, that's at the base of Mount Hermon. Caesarea Philippi is at the base of Mount Hermon, where the 200 Watcher-class angels landed in the days of Jared. And there, at that time, when Yeshua was there with his disciples, there was the altar to the Greek god Pan. And a whole bunch of other Greek gods were represented there as well. And then if Pan's right here, then off to the left was a place known, and is still known to this day, as the Gate of Hades. It's a cave at the base of Mount Hermon. And Yeshua says, "Who do men say that I am?" And the disciples are like, "Well, some say Jeremiah, one of the prophets, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And, Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, plural, will not overpower it." I never understood, why does Yeshua get so excited about, Peter says, "You're the Christ." Well, other people, the demons said it all the time. "You're the Christ, you're the Son of God." He told them to be quiet. We picked Nathaniel, he said, "You are the Christ." He says, "Why? Because I saw you under the fig tree," at the beginning of his ministry. So he had people telling him he's the Christ, the Son of God, all through his ministry. Demons are saying it, people are saying it. So what's the big deal when Peter says it? I think the big deal is Peter understood the significance of the location. We knew that Peter understood what happened in the book of Enoch because he later writes about it. the angels that sinned, who were bound in chains and put in Tartarus. Peter figured it out. So I'm a filmmaker, so the way I envision the conversation is, if you can imagine, like, this is the altar of Pan right here and all the other gods, and Jesus is standing here with his back to that, and you're Peter looking this way, at Yeshua. And I can just see Peter thinking to himself, he knows who we think he is. Why is he asking this? And if I'm shooting the scene, the way I would see it is like, Peter's point of view, he's looking at Yeshua in focus, and all of a sudden Yeshua goes out of focus, and Pan comes in focus, and then Pan goes out of focus, and then Yeshua comes back in focus, and a light bulb goes off, and Peter goes, oh, I get it. You are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God, not these pagan Greek gods and all this other stuff. Peter understood the significance of the location where they were standing, and that's why Yeshua got excited. So, you get it. I want you to get it. If you're looking at Mount Hermon, it was a very strategic place for Yeshua to bring his disciples. His destination is Jerusalem. So he takes this massive detour to go all the way up to northern Israel, southern Lebanon, to stop at Caesarea Philippi to have this conversation? Really? And then he takes, I think it was Peter, James, and John, to the top of a high mountain. It's the highest mountain in the region. So many scholars believe, as I also believe, that he took them to the top of Mount Hermon, to ground zero where the angels landed. Whose goal, the first prophecy in the Bible was that Eve's seed was going to crush the devil's head. So if you're the devil and you're hearing that prophecy, her seed's going to crush your head. What do you think you're going to do to her seed? You're going to mess it up. That's a bad thing, getting your head crushed, right? So if the prophecy is her seed's going to crush my head, well, I'm going to mess up her seed then. That's what took place in Genesis chapter 6. And the promised seed himself, the guy who showed up in the fulfillment of that prophecy, the seed of Eve, finally shows up and steps on ground zero, where the plan was hatched to try to get rid of him from ever happening in the first place. If you look down from Mount Hermon, down, if you're on Mount Hermon facing Israel, down sort of to the left right there is the fortress of Nimrod. It's right there. This is the area where they would have had the conversation right there. That's the cave. That's the gate of Hades, which is also depicted over here. That's actual. He was standing in front of a gate of Hades when he said the gates of Hades are not going to prevail. And it takes them to the top of a high mountain. This is the top of Mount Hermon today, where they have a UN radar outpost up there. I understand the strategic location, with Syria, Lebanon, and all that. There may be other reasons too, though. Especially if you start researching satanic ritual abuse, SRA, you'll find a lot of stories traced back to that spot right there in current, today, satanic ritual abuse situations. But there's also a cross set up there, where people put that there because they believe that's where the Mount of Transfiguration, where that event took place. I believe that that's where it took place as well. Moral of the story, the whole thing is, look, do not be deceived. We know there's a coming great deception, right? This could be so great that even the elect could be deceived by it, right? If it be possible, the text says. I'm going to submit to you, it's very possible. I think that we're already deceived about a great many things. Some people say, well, it says if it be possible, that means it's not going to be possible. Are you kidding me? Do we need to talk about Christmas? Do we need to talk about Easter? How many things do we got to talk about? We're already deceived about. And when the disciples came to Yeshua and they said, what's it going to be like the last days when you come back? The first thing he says, let no man deceive you. So if it's not possible to be deceived, why did he start out with, don't let anybody deceive you? It's going to be very possible. So, hopefully throughout this weekend, as each of us go through our presentations, this will help us all not to be deceived. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and we'll see you back next time.